uma agência flutuante. Provendo educação financeira, estímulo ao empreendedorismo, apoio às culturas sustentáveis. A Fundação Bradesco leva educação de qualidade à Amazônia por meio de 11 escolas físicas e também pela escola virtual. Apoiar a inclusão, o desenvolvimento e a preservação. Fazer diferença na vida das comunidades e das pessoas está no nosso propósito. Porque entre nós, você vem primeiro. Bradesco.
A energia da Equinor está em linha com a mudança, buscando energia mais limpa, alinhando eficiência com fontes renováveis, em linha com a inovação e com a diversidade. Nossa energia está em linha com um futuro melhor. A energia da Equinor.
Já parou para pensar para onde vai a nossa energia? A nossa energia incentiva descobertas, conquistas, promove inovações e gera encontros. E tão importante quanto descobrir para onde ela vai é saber de onde ela vem. Shell, energia que vem da gente.
Life is about balance. Balance between individual wants, collective needs, and the demands of our planet. But forget sacrifice or compromise. We combine the essential, the desirable, and the sustainable to ensure all life on Earth has what it wants and what it needs. At DSM Firmenich, we make delicious, nutritious food more accessible to all. We help farmers thrive within nature's limits. We enrich staple foods to improve the health of millions. And we create fine fragrances that boost concentration, creativity, and mood. It's complex stuff, but the outcome is simple. We enrich life for the many while nurturing it for all. Our two companies form a single force for good, full of life in all its glory, as innovators in nutrition, health, and beauty. Together, we bring progress to life. Together, we are DSM Firmenich.
A JBS nasceu há 70 anos no interior do Brasil, alimentando sonhos e a realização deles. E foi alimentando o sonho brasileiro de ser uma empresa global, que hoje a JBS é a maior empresa do mundo em seu setor. Produz em 16 países, está nos pratos em milhares de lares pelo mundo. Mas suas raízes estão no Brasil, onde alimenta crescimento, alimenta a geração de empregos para os 151 mil colaboradores. Alimenta a sustentabilidade para fazer cada vez mais com menos. Alimenta a tecnologia para tirar o máximo de cada proteína e até criar novas. Alimenta o mundo, alimenta o Brasil, alimenta você. JBS, há 70 anos, alimentando o que alimenta o mundo.
O presente nunca nos impôs tantos desafios
como os trazidos pelas mudanças climáticas
que afetam a agricultura.
E como superar os desafios?
E, ao mesmo tempo, manter a produção sustentável de alimentos em um mundo em constante crescimento?
Para a Singenta, a resposta começa no solo, que é a base de tudo.
Nossas tecnologias e soluções contribuem diretamente para que os agricultores cuidem da terra.
Desde herbicidas que promovem práticas como o plantio direto,
até programas para recuperação de áreas degradadas,
como Reverte, e parcerias que corroborem nossa missão de expandir a agricultura positiva.
Esse é o compromisso Singenta.
Bom dia a todos. Meu nome é Maria Clara, eu sou gerente de comunicação institucional do CEBDS. Sejam muito bem-vindos.
Good morning, everyone. Maria Clara, welcome. I'm Roberto Belém, I'm Manager of Communication and Press with our company with CEBDS. So we're going to be conducting you to our debate. Unfortunately, Marina Silva has been called upon for an important meeting. She won't be able to be here with us. Welcome to the Sustainable Conference in 2023. This is a CEBDS meeting, and we represent the International Network for Work Business Council for Sustainable Development. This event is a partnership with Economic Value, and CEBDS is a council that is made up of the most important business groups in Brazil, promoting sustainable growth by means of a connection with the government and the civil society, propagating most recent concepts and practice in the topic. We are connecting over 110 business groups, and we would like to thank the sponsors that made this possible: Petrobras, federal government, Arcadis, Bradesco, Equinor, Shell, DSM Sirmenish, JBS, and Syngenta. We also thank the technical team from CEBDS that worked in this program. CEBDS 2023 had all the carbon emissions compensated for with DIPSG. We're going to talk to speakers so that we can foster the present of a more sustainable future. And Brazil is going to be one of the main players in this kind of economy. We're going to launch a series of initiatives and publications. We have the NFP that is aimed at generating positive impact in nature. OBCTI, that is something that mobilizes the private sector in the fight for social inequality. We have the Reporting Matters initiative as well, qualifying corporate reports in sustainability, and a specific launch for investors in our communication and sustainability guidelines. We also have the Reimagine exercise, an invitation for us to imagine sustainable futures and everything we want out of it. We're going to develop these images. So artificial intelligence is going to create that, but based on your ideas. So you can use the QR code that is in here on the screen to send your suggestions. If need be, you can talk to our team at the back of the room. And we hope these images can be an inspiration and a reminder of how we can work together. On the back of your badge, we have the QR code so you can have an access to the complete program of the event, the publication that we just mentioned, to get to know the scenario, the stage here, in fact, that used the recycled material from other projects. We have information for restaurants, for lunch, and the event assessment form. We are not responsible for anything that people leave inside or outside the theater. Our event is being broadcasted through the Valor Econômico channels. If you want to share that in your social network so more people can follow the debate, we will thank you for that. I'd like to invite Marina Grossi, the head of CEBDS, for the initial opening remarks. So Marina, the floor is all yours. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I think the last time we were at a sustainable event like this, we were in the pandemics. So it's quite likely that now you are face to face after a very long time. Welcome. We are in the the COP has proposed. Why are we so relevant? We have comparative advantages that are huge. We have a cultural advantage. We have for 56% black people in our makeup, 42% white, 1.69 million indigenous people, and 1.32 million people that live in the Quilombos. Our electric matrix is almost 96% renewable, and for G20 they are at almost 30. And our electric matrix, our power matrix, we are at almost 50% renewable energies. So we are the barn for the rest of the world, so to speak. We are the warehouse for food items for the rest of the world. So we became an importer for food items, and then we turned into an exporter. And Brazil represents most of the food exports all over the world, and we have a huge reforestation program. Even though we have had lots of threats in Brazil, we have had a constitution for 36 years in place, and the three powers are in place. But we have challenges. The main one, which CEBDS is basically extremely engaged with, particularly since 2014, which is the illegal logging. And we know that it's not just control measure that we need, but we need to have an alternative model for business. We have good news about that. We see that deforestation is being reduced with control and command initiatives by the government. And we see that deforestation in the Brazilian savanna has increased quite a lot. The loss of forest and the spike in carbon emissions are crises that are retrofed to each other, and we feel the impacts. Now we see the great drought in Manaus with the Rio Negro reaching its lowest level in history, and approximately 500,000 people have been impacted by this drought. 2023 is the hottest year in the history in Brazil. And it's not just Brazil. All over the world this has been felt. We have abnormal temperatures at this new level because Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary General, to say that we're going through a global crisis in this scenario. When you come to this theater, we can see that there are many people that live as a homeless person, and they are basically sleeping underneath this theater here. And this is part of the result of the destruction of the ecosystem. 30% of the Brazilians live below the poverty line, and 9% live in extreme poverty. In the G20, Brazil is considered the most unequal group, only below South Africa. And we have to add value to our social and environmental capital by generating green jobs and working on inclusive economy. But we have challenges for that. One of them is the legal unsafety or insecurity, in fact. We need more legal security. We need to build our taxonomy. We need to cause this legal insecurity to be reduced. And these measures can basically help in this scenario. And by 2025, this will require something at around $53 trillion. One of the ways to make this available is the carbon market, which has been something that we raised back in 2016 as one of our main flags. And this is crucial to enable resources for this transition, talking about industry and energy. So at the Senate, we passed a law along these lines, and we hope that we can promote advances in this area, because this is a very near and dear asset for CEBDS, and it's important for us to contribute at the ministries and the private sector, and we gather a lot of representatives of the private sector for this area. And those that are going to be regulated are requesting for that regulation to happen. And this is one of the main initiatives by the Green Package from Haddad, and I will talk about that pretty soon. Along these 26 years, we have been building bridges and leveraging concrete evolution. One of the examples is that for climate neutralization, we have been able to turn around what we had promoted in Brazil for this climate balance in the country with the help of the CEOs, and we are now a subscriber of the Paris Agreement for 2050, and it makes no sense for a country such as Brazil to talk about being less ambitious with the NDC that we have, with the commitment that we have for the Paris Agreement. This journey of helping companies, this is something that CEBDS always does on an everyday basis. With the Business Council, we launched our own platform, but this is the Net Zero platform. We launched this at the last COP in Egypt, and this is kind of integrated, and we have the climate drive, which is basically in our scenario. Our concern has always been with this kind of a tool for that. What we have in Brazil talks to the rest of the world. There's no point in creating a local solution only if this solution is not understood all over the world. Last year, in 2015, in the biodiversity, we launched our Action for Nature platform. More recently, we have been helping substantially in the ecological transformation plan by Minister Haddad with 6 pillars. In record time, we have taken our CEOs to have a first conversation, and Minister Haddad was quite open to that. And 18 days later, in a very hard work by the teams in the companies, we have delivered subsidies for all of the 6 pillars in the green plan by Minister Haddad. And this is something that touches all the other ministries. We are helping in the biodiversity goals at the local level by means of the strategy and the local plan for biodiversity. Last but not least, let me just drink a little bit of water here, if you allow me. So last but not least, the Amazon has been one of our main concerns since 2014. We started by positioning the business, positioning by the private sector with investors, the private sector and companies. So we talked to all the powers to have control on this area. And our companies had the power because we operate in the Amazon, and over 50% of our companies operate in the Amazon area. And they said that it is possible to do business, preserve, and produce. In 2021, this started out a business movement for Amazon with the goal of mobilizing the companies but inserting that biome in the business strategies. The Amazon is a guardian for solutions for the climate crisis and the loss for biodiversity. It can catalyze all of the problems in the Brazilian economy, generating 212,000 jobs and attracting a lot of foreign investment. And making this forest scenario solution is something that we are extremely mobilized about in the Amazon area. Well, at least for 4 segments: bioeconomy, agriculture, cattle farming, and other areas. This is something really important for us. So I'm going to be moving over to the end because my time is almost over. And I'm going to talk about our journey from Dubai to Belém. And when we talked to Peter Barker in the last meeting, we were trying to organize how we can be together at the domestic level and the global level to warm up this journey in such near and dear topics like, climatic changes and nature-based solutions to build this legacy forward. And this is an agenda that has not been at the COP for several years. Brazil can have a key role to avoid stagnation of the climate agenda. We can lead by example. The private sector has 112 companies representing 50% of the GDP. So we can build a common project with soft power in our commitment, but we have to have an action plan in place, and that requires an effort by all. And we are here to talk about how we can move forward as a society and as the government. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marina. Now I'd like to call upon Mr. Peter Barker, the President of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development.
Good morning. I'm going to speak English, so if you need translation, please put on your devices. And it was such a pleasure to listen to Marina. Anyone who's ever worked with her directly, you can only love her, so thanks for the great speech. Thanks for the overview. And thanks for your leadership, because do not underestimate the power that CEBDS has in the global conversation. You cannot go to a COP anywhere in the world, or Marina and her team will be there representing the voice of Brazil and Brazilian business. So, well done. So I'm with the World Business Council, 230 of the largest companies in the world working on exactly the same agenda as CEBDS does here in Brazil. Very close working relationship, and I should say this at the end of my talk, but from Dubai to Belém, we will be working together. And that is an absolute amazing opportunity for all of us. Just like Marina said, in WBCSD, we see three global challenges. One is the climate emergency. We don't talk about climate change anymore. This is about climate emergency. The second is the loss of nature. And the third one is mounting inequality. Marina gave examples of here in Brazil. But inequality is now a very wide-spreading disease in our economic systems, leading to polarization in politics and making the world for business rather unpredictable. And so if you look at these three crises, climate, nature, inequality, then the answer to that is no longer incremental change. Many of us, many of you will be in business, and we have all become successful by incrementally changing and improving our businesses. Getting productivity up, getting pricing power up, your profit would go up and business would be fine. That's no longer the era we're in. We are now in the era of system transformation, of economy-wide change that we need to move. So when I saw the motto of this meeting, the leaders of the new economy, I thought that's the place to be. And it happens to be that Brazil is the place to be. Thank you. If we think about system transformation, we see two big axes of change. One is the axe of innovation, of new technologies, new business models, new products coming to market. And the other one is the change of economic incentives. We cannot deal with all these sustainability challenges on an IRR basis, on a discounted cash flow basis. We need new metrics to measure whether we are making success. The great news for anyone in business, and I think you're experiencing it here in Brazil as well, is that the world is now turning to business for the solutions. It's no longer against business because business has negative impacts. It's now really looking at what is the innovation power that business can bring, what are the solutions that we can invest in, and how do we scale those up? And that is really beginning to work. And I'm pretty sure when we all go to Dubai in a few weeks for COP28, we'll see expressions of that. I would anticipate out of Dubai coming ambitious targets for scope 1 and 2 reductions in oil and gas, tripling renewable energy by 2030 globally, doubling green hydrogen by 2030 globally. Do is not just change its own operations, important as it is, but we must think how do we change the value chains from raw material to end of product. And that means we need data, we need science, and we need collaboration with many partners that we work and form these value chains with. Then when it comes to these economic incentives, the thing that will happen in a few weeks in Dubai is the launch in a very big way of the corporate performance and accountability system for carbon. I don't have time this morning to go in great detail on that, but what it basically means, business needs to learn to manage carbon the same way that they manage money. So what that means, the company sets a science-based target. It creates a transition plan towards net zero, i.e. a strategy plan. It needs to measure the emissions that it has, and then it needs to report or disclose these emissions to the outside world using a global comparable framework like the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board. If we get that right, and there's lots of work to be done around scope 3 emissions, avoided emissions, but if we get that performance system right, then you will see two things. Business will drive innovation, business will be willing to be held accountable for the progress, and these two things combined will generate A, trust in business as a positive actor in the world, and secondly, will drive the transformation that the world needs. So that's the global view. Innovation is the word going forward. Accountability and performance management will be the way to drive that forward. Now let me spend a few moments on talking Brazil and wider Latin America. In many years, and particularly in some of the quickly changing electoral pictures in countries like here, Brazil hasn't been on the forefront of the global debate. That, I hope, will now change. With COP30 coming to Belém, with the G20 being here next year, Brazil will form the global stage on which we will all meet to talk about the transformation the world needs. And if I think about Brazil and the innovations that it needs and can drive to realize these system transformations, it will all be about regenerative agriculture. How can we make biofuels really part of the mix of renewable energy? What can we do to drive and scale the bioeconomy in the world? What can we do here to really drive and be the example for green industrialization? Those are areas, combined with the voluntary carbon market that will be coming here, that really makes these words on the screen, not just words on a screen, but an ambition that we should all have. Make Brazil the leader of the new economy, make Brazilian and Latin American business leaders the leaders who will come to COP30 in 2 years from now with the innovations that the world needs, and that is why I'm here, and that's why I'll be here many times between now and COP30, to drive you, to inspire you, to cheer you on, because we need Brazil and Brazilian businesses to lead the transformation. Thank you very much.
Obrigada, Peter.
Thank you, Peter.
Nesse momento eu quero convidar ao palco
Now,
Ana
I'd
Toni,
like to
secretária de
invite
Mudanças
Ana Toni,
Climáticas
she's
do
the
Ministério do
Secretary
Meio
for
Ambiente e
Climate
Mudanças
Change
Climáticas.
for the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I can imagine your being upset, not only for Marina Silva, but I'd like to apologize. But as it was mentioned, the minister, Marina Silva, she was summoned for an emergency meeting, so unfortunately she couldn't join us. I'm trying to represent her, understanding the responsibility that this poses. First, I'd like to thank Marina Grossi and the Brazilian Business Council for the invitation. It is a great pleasure being here, understanding that this is 11th edition of the Sustainable Congress, showing the resilience by the Brazilian Business Council and its leadership in terms of working with the sustainability topic, and we've been concerned about it for a long time. The topic for this Congress couldn't have been chosen better when we talk about sustainability. As it was mentioned now, I am a Secretary of Climate in the Ministry of Environment, not only representing Minister Marina Silva, but also showing what the Brazilian government is doing. Government Lula is coming now in his third administration, prioritizing sustainability. This is probably the greatest mark
of the Lula administration in its third edition, sustainability in its three major pillars: economic, social, and obviously environmental. Perhaps, no, actually, differently from what we've seen in the past, this mark of sustainability, it's not just a spoken mark, but it's an actionable mark. And I'd say that this is a very unique moment, almost as a perfect storm. As was mentioned, not only do we have a government that is completely committed to doing sustainability rather than just talking about it, but this is also a unique moment for Brazil. Brazil will be in 2022. Well, in 2022, we started leading different roles, including the G20, and also we are the president for Mercosur. It's not a coincidence that Mercosur and the European Union are trying to reach an agreement next year, being in the chair of G20. Plus, we're going to be with BRICS and BRICS Plus. And we're going to have our grand finale, which is going to be COP30 in 2025. We have then the opportunity to nationally work on that, and as we do it nationally, we can also take the leadership and lead by example, as Minister Marina mentioned, so that we can show the world and bring the world in this doing of the sustainability. When I talk about doing sustainability, everyone asks, what are you doing as a government or with the government? And that's a little bit of the accountability I want to share about what the government is doing. I'd like to remind you that when we speak of the environment, we received many ministries from the government with lots of problems that everyone know about in terms of the deterioration of those ministries and departments. But now, in those 11 months, we have 49% of deforestation having decreased in comparison to last year. And also millions of tons of carbon that have not been put out to the atmosphere. We have always recently brought a new consultation, public consultation for specific projects. We also have this fund that is managed by the BNDES, not only as it was done before, but now we have 10 billion, 0.4 of reais to finance projects in the area of sustainability. The Amazon Fund also is back, and now not only supporting projects in the Amazon, but also with the municipality to foment an economy that, because we know that only command and control is not enough to control the deforestation issue. In a very short period, considering government administrations, we were able to reach this context of the carbon market, working with Senate, Leila, to at least in Senate have the approbation, and also the carbon market was mentioned there. We're also currently working in the wind power, offshore wind power energy, which we know it's so important for Brazil. The Safra plan has already taken its first steps to connect the Safra plan to the ABC plan, showing that at the end, we want the whole agriculture area to be the agriculture that we want for Brazil, a low carbon agriculture. The fuel of the future was relaunched, multiple activities that show the doing in practical terms, that the federal government is trying to show that the sustainability is not theory, but rather the practicality that will make legitimate our international leadership. But all those activities, they compose something that is bigger and has been mentioned, which is the ecological transition plan. It is a dynamic plan. It's not just a plan with 6 steps, 6 different stages, but rather a plan that shows where Brazil wants to position itself. Brazil as a social environment power, as a sustainability power. This is what the government sees, building together with the private sector, civil societies, and academia. And then the mitigation plans that have already been decided in the inter-ministry committees, 8 mitigation plans and 14 adaptation plans. We expect to design those plans. We have already started them, almost as business plans. We want to conclude each of them understanding how much mitigating will cost in terms of transportation, energy, industry, where the resources will come from, what kind of legal framework do we need for those plans to be not only government plans, but also plans that the private sector can build together with us and that we are able to support also the implementation eventually. But we understand that not only Brazil, but also on a world level, we are at the crossroads to head to a more sustainable world, not repeating the same mistakes from the past. We already have all the evidence. We already have all the reports. The IPCC report, or the reports by IPCC, or Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, also the Energy Agency, International Agency. I think we already have the evidence. We know the choices we need to make. And at the same time, we are seeing the consequence of non-action. What we see in the Amazon now, or in the state of Santa Catarina, or what happened in the state of Rio Grande do Sul, or here in the north coast of the state of São Paulo, that shows also the price of non-action. And will be the same for the private sector, that will be paying for the price of non-action. And obviously, everything that needs to be considered. Obviously, we don't have the same resources of the developed nations, so the ecological transition plan is almost an inspiration from the new Green Deal from Europe or the American plan, but with way less resources, as we know. Therefore, in Brazil, for those plans to take off, we will still need the partnership with the private sector. This partnership will be ever more important so that those plans can become a reality in the sense of building together. I think this is of the essence for us to be here joining this Brazilian Business Council meeting, because a sustainable partnership will only happen if there's a partnership between federal government, national governments, and obviously the private sector. I was reading an article the other day that mentioned that the time is always proper to do the right thing. That was a Martin Luther King quote. And the right moment to do the right thing is now. The country cannot just continue waiting more and more with the climate issues we're having, but above all, Brazil cannot allow itself to do the thing, not do what needs to be done now. We have lost opportunities of becoming the country of the future. So as we become the country of the present, and now with this alignment between federal government, civil societies, private sector, national governments, having all the legal security that were very well placed, we'll be able to implement this Brazil, which is a sustainable power. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much, Ana. We are now showing a video, a welcome video from the Petrobras President Jean Paul Prates. Welcome everyone present in the Sustainable Congress 2023 promoted by the Brazilian Business Council, Sustainable Congress, and they are a reference in this area. in the whole country. I really would like to be joining you in this 11th edition of the event, but as everyone know, today we are here in Brasilia today with our other directors celebrating our 70 years of Petrobras. Although I'm not able to join in person, I really wanted to record this video to thank the invitation and reinforce that Petrobras considers this discussion very important in terms of Brazilians' engagement in the global discussion and sustainability and also fair energy transition. Also considering the presence of Brazil or Brazil in G20 and also COP30 in Belém, those will be opportunities to even strengthen the Brazilian contribution in this topic. Petrobras is really engaged in this discussion and will be very well represented by our executives. The sustainable development has the commitment has a daily commitment by Petrobras. One of its main premises is the energy transition, which at the same time fight climate change and doesn't encourage the poverty by the energy sector. And as we say here, we're not going to leave no man behind. We're going to lead a fair energy transition in Latin America. I wish all of you a great event, and once again, I'd like to thank Chairman Marina Grossi. Also, I want to express our gratitude to the World Business Council, and I also would like to thank everyone who's present here. And now, I pass the floor via Viviane Coelho, our Executive President. I'd like to invite Viviane Coelho to join us on stage and share a few things with us. She's the head of climate change and decarbonization for Petrobras. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure being here. Thank you, CEBDS, for the organization of the 11th edition of the event. I'd like to make some quick comments. Sustainability has always been a competitiveness issue, and at Petrobras, understanding all the things that are being being dealt with through different nations, this will always be a competitiveness factor, including affecting international commerce. Energy is a central element when we talk about energy transition. When we talk about decarbonization and fighting the climate emergencies, because we understand that it represents 80% of world emissions, and there's a characteristic that influences the well-being, productivity, and competitiveness in the chain. It affects the economy in its base. It affects the economy both in cost and productivity. Countries with energy poverty has less manpower because people are less available to be productive. It is in energy that we have some of the most win-win opportunities for any society. It is through energy that we can identify simple opportunities for decarbonization, for example, through efficiency, the efficiency of infrastructure, of the users of energy, with great diagonal benefits in terms also of competitiveness and quality of life, especially in urban centers. It is also in energy that we have certain sectors that are the most difficult to decarbonize. It's also in energy we have sectors that may cost hundreds of dollars to reduce carbon emissions, and therefore are the sectors that, when we optimize climate modeling, and climate modeling, it is ideally we should reduce as fast as possible, and also as we tackle what is at hand first. Say we have $300 to allocate in energy transition, we're able to do more, applying the resources at what costs less for each ton of carbon. So energy, it is a core issue. And Brazil is a huge case of success in energy. We have the second lowest unit emission in G20. It's almost 4 times less especially if produced in Brazil in terms of carbon energy. We're going to be 3 to 4 times less compared to what is produced in the average of OECD. We have an electric energy matrix that is so efficient that it is what is expected for the world level by 2050 in the 1.5 scenario. But there's still lots to do. We have 10 more biofuel than the world average, but we still have more to be done. We have a country in development, a necessity to expand in a clean and competitive and fair way, and also have lots of energy efficient, especially our electric matrix is really advanced, but our consumption is quite inefficient in a country. And this matrix that is advanced, it is through comparative advantages. Of course, we have great potential for renewables. We have access to almost all types of energy, but also it is a target of public policies that allowed us to get here. There are incentives for us to get here and for us to have the energy matrix that we have today. I'd like to reinforce Petrobras, which celebrated 80 years now in October, is really attentive to comply with ethical and competitiveness concepts that is very important to us. I want to make it clear that we understand that the world market needs that transition by 2015, especially by 2030.
We do not work with the hypothesis that there is an endless oil market within Petrobras, and that's why we believe that oil is only going to be legitimate, that it's not going to disappear, that it's going to be associated to non-energy niche markets and for niches that are going to be hard to abate in the future, and it's only going to be legitimate for oil production for those who are extremely efficient. That's why we have reduced 40% of our operational emissions, and we have doubled our efficiency in our oil fields and rigs, and we operate some of the most efficient oil fields in the world. Each staff members at Petrobras has carbon emissions linked to their variable remuneration, and we have a growing innovation target, and we have a very huge and relevant innovation capacity, which is a catalyst for innovation in the country. We had a meaningful goal in efficiency in our refineries, and we have a budget and target for decarbonization that is at around $600 million for a period of 5 years. And this is something that would not have been conducted had this budget not existed. Of course, knowing that oil is going to be reduced, we know that some markets will need to increase, and that is the sustainable market for sustainable fuels and for electrical power. For oil to be phased out, the proportion of this renewable energy growth has to be very high. So that's why Petrobras has announced our intention in expanding our low carbon chain participation involving sustainable fuels and the renewable electric energy. And as I said, just to wrap this up, of course in Brazil, unlike the rest of the world, energy is responsible for 23% of emissions. Naturally, because of this important profile of renewables in the Brazilian energy, and because of Brazil when it comes to emissions coming from the use of the land. And Petrobras has a very important operation when it comes to biodiversity, forests, and deforestation. We have the largest beach monitoring program all over the world with 140 million reais invested in 2022, thus supporting seashore biodiversity. We have our first credit for carbon emission in 2023 that was issued in a program as a way to support the maintenance of the forest and the restoration of Brazilian ecosystems. The Petrobras Socioambiental Environment and Program has been investing in several licensing programs, and our licensing program has been made with 3 billion reais when it comes to the conservation units that have been issued for the licensing. And Petrobras is one of the funders for the Amazon Fund. And we understand that the Petrobras presence is relevant and it enables Brazil to have its own space in the international oil market, and we hope that we can produce oil that is at a lower level of emission, bringing money to Brazil. Each oil barrel produced in Brazil is equivalent to 4,000 tons in royalties and carbon emission decarbonization program. So we hope that we can collaborate by producing oil that is the one that is required in this transition world, investing in new energies and contributing to the challenge in bioeconomy and the reduction of deforestation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Viviana. Now we're going to start the first panel, which is going to be focused on Brazil, the player in the new economy. I invite Ambassador André Corrêa do Lago, Secretary for Climate, Energy and Environment at the Brazilian government. I also invite Gilberto Tomazoni, Global CEO of JBS. I'd like to call upon Verônica Coelho, CEO of Econômico Brazil. Also Marina Grossi, who's going to be moderating the debate. And I'd like to call upon our Special Envoy for Climate in the United States, John Forbes Kerry. Marina, the floor is all yours. Thank you very much. Hello. Hi, can you hear me? All right, thank you, Pelin. Thank you, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with Veronica, Tomazoni, André, and Mr. Kerry. We have been talking about this ever since Brazil has been nominated for the Belém COP itself. Now there is these factors in place with the government, with the private initiative, and CEBDS talking about this for 26 years now and causing this agenda to evolve in the country. But now we have the perfect storm, so to speak, so we can move forward on that. So is it Brazil's turn, really, André? How do you perceive that? Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here with all of you. Marina, this question is quite specific, and I'm going to try not to take too long in my answering. But I think that, one thing that we have to consider is that Brazil has already done extraordinary things. Brazil is an extraordinary country in its own right, and this idea of the country of the future is that we're able to do a lot more. It's not like we've lost all of the opportunities. I think that we've had extraordinary advancements and we have a wonderful society. So which developing country has the industrial scenario that we have, the institutions, the governance, civil society, science, academia? So Brazil has delivered quite a lot. But it's true that we have an even more extraordinary future. And I think that this is a very important moment for Brazil. And this has been designed in such a way that Brazil is able to position itself in a very favorable manner. I'm extremely confident and very well impressed, and I think that Ana said it clearly. It's important to have a government where the Ministry of Treasury does a plan for ecological transformation where we can add a logic of sustainable development for the whole world. And this is something that very few countries in the world have done. And we have all of our tradition in foreign negotiation. I think that everything has been kind of staged so that this moment could come and that we could make the best of it. Thank you, Andre. Now I have a question to Mr. John Kerry, the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate in the United States. I'm going to ask it in Portuguese, but we have interpretation going on in there, right? Okay, in the view of the United States, what is the position that Brazil can and shall develop in the global scenario for the climate agenda? And what is missing for Brazil to really fill in that space? The floor is all yours, John Kerry. So Gilberto Tomazoni, JBS CEO. So Tomazoni, I think that we may have been talking about agriculture in Brazil, and I think that we may have that in our opening remarks. And the biggest challenge is in supply chain, where we have most of the emissions available. How can one of the largest producers of food items in the world prepare itself for this global leadership? How are you preparing for Scope 3? Because Scope 3 is the main challenge. So what are the measures that you're putting in place for that? Well, Marina, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here. And talking about this issue is important for us.
Estão ouvindo? Ok. Então, obrigado pela oportunidade. Eu acho que essa discussão.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think that, this climate change is really important, or climate emergency is really important. And I would add that the food insecurity scenario is also something that needs to be addressed. And as JBS said, we are in 20 countries in 5 continents. And our core is biogenic by nature. And we have been working with hundreds and thousands of rural producers that grow food items by working in hundreds of millions of hectares. That's why sustainability is at the core of our strategy, and we have decided to be net zero by 2040. First thing we did is we have been mapping out all of our emissions, so it's over 500 sites all over the world, and 30 different types of business and all kinds of protein sources, and this is going to be a roadmap for each type of protein for each business unit, and this is going to be ready by early next year. But we're taking very quick actions for scopes 1 and 2, so we're moving quite quickly in there. We have invested over $130 million with 180 projects, and there are several projects that go from changing the energy matrix. But one of the important things that we're doing is, using our industrial waste as raw material to add value. And we have, for example, established a fertilizer industry, a biofuel industry, a collagen or peptide and gelatin business. We are producing energy and how to use biomass and now aviation fuel. If any of you is flying from Sacramento in the United States to Los Angeles with United, you're going to be flying with our special fuel. And Scope 3 is the great producer of emissions with over 98.5%. So one can imagine how different it is for working with such a large number of producers. And we have a huge pyramid with a different strategy for every tier in the pyramid. For large producers, we work with them to have this integration of crops with cattle farming and forests, so we can have a better production, reducing emission, and cutting deforestation to zero. And we have a farming assurance campaign that we call Fazenda Nota 10 in Brazil, so that we work with producers to increase productivity and use a crop rotation or generative crop system so we can produce more with less errors. And then we get to small farmers. We're investing in offices, and we have positioned 19 to 20 green offices all over Brazil to provide assistance to these producers so we can have that kind of a support on their transition. Because I feel that nowadays we are kind of sitting in the middle of the chain, and I think that this is a privilege that we can cause a lot of influence in the long chain, because we bring transformation to the way we produce things. So from these offices we take technical support and we help farmers to do that transition. Anyone that has a problem with compliance with the legislation, these folks are compliant, and we work with thousands of farmers with thousands of hectares of area that have been recovered, and we have over 2 million cattle that were illegal in the system, and now they are all legalized. Then we have micro farmers, because we talked about social inequality, and we have the Amazon Fund that is going to take work to these micro producers. We have 1,600 farmers, families, and now by the end of the project we're going to have like 7,000 or 8,000 families of farmers, and now they're going to be eligible to carbon credits. And tomorrow we're going to launch a revolutionary program with the Amazon Business Fund, which is going to enable us to take very high technology to these micro farmers to track all of the value chain. But the challenges we have in this chain are huge, and we're working not just on the topics that we are discussing here, just so we're not talking about theory, but we're working in coalitions. We believe that no one is going to solve this on their own. We're going to have to do things together. And now we're working with the government in Pará, and we have the Brazilian Association of Producers and Growers of beef and so on, and the civil society like the Nature Conservancy is part of this association, and we try to take technical support, lend the most visibility in this chain, and to make the use of land more of a regular and new area of improvement. So we have invested in technology, and we have developed the egg farms of the future in England. So we use geological energy, so we drill holes of 140 meters deep, and we use that for generating electricity, so that it's a sustainable energy source. And we have been investing in developments with the University of Nebraska. So we are building the Innovation Center for Feedlot in the United States, and we have been using all of this technology to reduce the endothermic fermentation so we can scale this kind of technology, because they are emerging and they need scale. So we have been doing a very holistic approach in all of the areas of focus in our area. Well, Tomazoni, as you said, this is the biggest challenge, not only in here, but all over the world. But the CEBD Net Zero platform has the climate drive as one of its tools, which is basically all about Scope 3. That's a great challenge.
Of coming in virtually, but it's terrific to be with all of you. It's a great audience, and I know that Ambassador Dulago knows very well how much the United States is pleased to be able to be working with an administration in Brazil that is serious and really wants to move forward. We're proud to be a strategic partner on the subject of the climate crisis. I've been working with Marina Silva and with others in your government. I'm sorry she had to go to a meeting, but I understand that challenge always for all of us. Look, our countries have an enormous amount in common, and we have not always succeeded in maximizing the opportunities for various reasons, which we don't need to go into, because we're both sitting here now staring at an imperative for action, as well as a remarkable opportunity for collaboration between us. Our two countries have an enormous amount in common. We are obviously the two largest democracies in the Western Hemisphere. We're also the two largest economies. And the United States is pleased that we are the largest source of foreign direct investment in Brazil. We're also both agricultural and energy powerhouses and mega-forest countries. You obviously having the prime forest of the planet. We are also the two largest emitters of greenhouse gases in the Western Hemisphere. And the United States obviously is number one in that score, though we are now going down thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act and President Biden's leadership, who has made this an all-of-government priority. So it's only natural that Brazil would play a key role in addressing the climate crisis on the international stage. And obviously, it is expected to be hosting COP30 in Belém. Let me tell you, as somebody who started this journey in 1988 when I was a senator, and Jim Hansen of the NASA testified to us in the Congress that climate change was happening. Since then, I've been to many, many, many meetings, including the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992, and many COPs thereafter. And it's a little bit jarring to me to be talking or even mentioning COP30 when we have yet to get COP28 under our belt. And I think all of us are asking the question, so how many COPs are there going to be? How many COPs is Mother Nature going to give us still before we have passed planetary boundaries that we can't come back from? And I just want to take one moment to stress to everybody the extreme urgency of being serious about this and taking enormous steps forward. I congratulate Equinor. I wish every oil and gas company in the world was doing all the things that Equinor is doing and is committed to sustainability and to being leaders in this transition from just an oil and gas company to a full-fledged energy production company, a modern energy production company. And I think it's obvious that Brazil has a huge stake in the success of COP28 coming up in Dubai and COP29, because whatever successes come out of those two COPs are going to land in the lap of Brazil in the context of 2030. So Brazil has a big interest in making sure that this COP brings people to the fold and we move forward. Now I know that with events in Ukraine and the events in the Middle East right now, unfolding even as we're talking right now, it may be hard for some people to fully wrap their arms around climate, which yet still, unfortunately, remains somehow elusive for some governments and willfully avoided by some governments and by certain corporations in the world. And that is tragic for all of us, because this takes every country, all of us doing everything possible. It's an all-hands-on-deck moment. And while the crises of Ukraine and the Middle East are unfolding, even as we're speaking here, with people dying and with the potential of great conflict, the fact remains that climate is taking lives all around the world on a daily basis. There are 7 million people dying every year just from the bad quality of air that comes from the greenhouse gas pollution, which is the cause of this crisis. I just want to take one moment to emphasize that. This does not require some, excuse me, some new level of political sagacity. It doesn't take some breaking of a new code or a new equation, a new algorithm. We know what's going on, and it's very straightforward. It's what we human beings are choosing to do every day as a form of transportation, of propulsion, of heat for our homes, lighting of our factories, of the way we produce power. This is from the burning of fossil fuel where we do not capture the emissions sufficiently. Now, some companies are working very hard on direct air carbon capture, and we have empowered companies through the Inflation Reduction Act. We have empowered companies to be in the position of using tax credits to be able to go forward with carbon capture, utilization, and storage. But we still have an enormous road to journey to be able to get to a point where we can say we're capturing the emissions. And that is why the scientists of the world have said to us, you must reduce your emissions by at least 43% by 2030 and by net zero by 2050. And we have yet to get many entities in the world to commit that that is in fact exactly what they're going to do. A prior speaker from Equinor mentioned the scope 1 and 2. We need to get every oil and gas company in the world committed to do scope 1 and 2 by 2030. We need to get them to commit that they're going to do all methane reduction by 2030, that we're going to increase our CapEx, the capital expenditures, on clean energy for the future, and that we're all going to come to the table with real plans to be able to achieve net zero by 2050. And the role that Brazil can play in this is absolutely critical. As an emerging economy, as a country with the great challenge of poverty, as a country with the massive Amazon, a country whose efforts on deforestation this year are inspiring, because your deforestation is falling by nearly half, and you've seen the global response in terms of the form of increased financing and investments. So if Brazil can continue to demonstrate the progress that it has and expand it to other biomes like the Cerrado or others, it can serve as a model for other countries. And Brazilian officials have been clear that these initial impressive gains are going to have to be followed up by long-term initiatives that provide the millions of residents of the Amazon. I often hear different figures, 25 million, 28 million, 30 million, but it's a lot of millions. It's a lot of people with real problems on a daily basis. And you have to come in and work on sustainable livelihoods in which forest protections go hand in hand with economic development. Now, one of the things we've learned in these last years is that you can actually farm much less land and produce even more product. And that is true also of cattle. So we're not in a situation where we have to say to people, oh, you have to give it up or you have to sacrifice. No, you could have a higher standard of living and still live sustainably. So Brazilian agribusiness has an opportunity to serve as an example of how high productivity can be combined with low emission practices without converting natural ecosystems. Now, I know that CEBDS has been very active in thinking about the models here, and Brazil has long showcased energy systems that can drive economic growth. So that's another place that you can make an enormous contribution to where we're heading. One last thing I'll just leave with you is that the fact is that we know that we can reduce these emissions. We know we have a better future on the other side of this transition. It will be cleaner. We will not lose 7 million people a year or give people cancer because of the coal-fired particulates that fall into the ocean, raise the acidity of the ocean, raise the temperature of the ocean, produce the increase of all these storms that we're living through around the world. We need to stop spending billions of dollars to clean up after a storm, rather than spending that money ahead of time to be able to avoid it and to be able to control forces that are way beyond our power. And that's what's frightening. And you know, the Potsdam Institute, Johann Rockström, the leading scientist and director, have made it clear that we may be at 5 tipping points right now. The tipping point of coral reefs in the ocean, from which you can't recover, the tipping point of permafrost thawing around the planet, which releases pent-up methane, which is 20 to 100 times more damaging than CO2. And that's happening around the planet now because of the thawing of the permafrost. The Barents Sea ice, which has disappeared and disappearing. And finally, the 2 biggest of all, the Arctic and the Antarctic. It was 100 degrees Fahrenheit and 70 degrees Fahrenheit on different occasions in the Antarctic last summer. And we are seeing that the heating of the poles, particularly the Arctic, is taking place 4 times faster than the rest of the planet. So my friends, this meeting and meetings like it could not be more important. And getting governments to work hand in hand with the private sector could not be more important. And having a country like Brazil, a major economic powerhouse, but still a growing, emerging economy with great human challenges, you have a voice at the table which really is one of the most important voices on the planet. So I thank you for the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you. I really look forward to our working together to get this right.
Thank you very much. Verônica, eu acho que ele levantou a bola para você.
Verônica, I think he raised the issue to you with Econômico. So could you speak a little of how a company that was originally oil and gas now sees an integrated energy system? And now you have in your website that you have the most balanced and sustainable ecosystem. And this is a long-term vision. How do you get there and what are your plans? Good morning. Can you hear me well? Marina, thank you for the invitation.